Good morning. This is the Lucy Ann Lance Show on Ann Arbor's talk station, 1290 WLBY. When you go to different towns, you probably notice distinct differences in the design of a town if you pay attention to the architecture of buildings, to how things are laid out. So how does Ann Arbor decide the way things are going to go? It's been a very interesting process over the last few years. And on our Damian on Design segment today, we're going to talk about Ann Arbor and the direction it's taking with design. As we welcome back Damian Farrell from
Good morning.
Damian Farrell Design Group. Great to see you again.
And you too.
And as a local architect, you deal with these issues on a regular basis.
Absolutely. A quarter of a century of it now.
And with us in studio as well from the City of Ann Arbor, we welcome Wendy Rampson, Planning Manager. You've been with the city how many years now?
28 years.
Long time. So you've seen a lot of these changes.
Right. I've seen downtown go from where you could shoot a cannon and not hit anyone to where it is right now. So it's really evolved quite a bit.
Yeah, do you remember how we were worried, when Briarwood Mall came in and how all of that business from downtown would migrate out there? And what would we do with our downtown? Ann Arbor was brilliant in how it remade itself, I think.
Right. Yeah. It really has found a niche and its own special place. So it's very fragile, so you have to be attentive to it, but it's doing pretty well.
Yeah, we took some dips there, didn't we? But the whole restaurant downtown, the entertainment part of downtown Main Street is.
Yeah.
I mean, when I hear of how people travel to be in Ann Arbor on Friday and Saturday nights, I love it when I hear my Birmingham and Bloomfield Hill friends say, we're coming over to Ann Arbor.
I know. Yes, we love that. Let's characterize for people listening what Ann Arbor was like pre A2D2, and I think you need to explain what we're talking about.
Okay. Well, A2D2 was a pretty ambitious initiative that Council kicked off in 2007. Ann Arbor Discovering Downtown, A2D2. And it followed on the heels of a visioning effort that was led by the consulting firm Calthorpe Associates from California. And there was this sense of discontent, I think, in the downtown that we needed to be something more. There was an interest in filling the spaces, the empty spaces in downtown, the surface parking lots, and having more activity, more economic energy, and more density, quite frankly, within the downtown. So Council embarked on this initiative. It had 5 elements. One was to remake the zoning for the downtown, which had been put in place in the 60s, and so look at that and see if it really supports what we're trying to accomplish in the downtown. Our historic preservation ordinances needed to be updated. We have 5 historic districts that have a portion or all of the district within the downtown area. We looked at design, and that's what we're going to talk about today. And there was a real sense that some of the recent development that had gone in really didn't meet the city's expectations for the ugly building test, I think, is what.
In the eye of beholder, though.
That is true, and there was very rigorous debate about that. And the other 2 elements, one was on transportation and parking, again, a perennial issue in the downtown, and our administrative processes. So Council set in place those 5 elements, and they all continued concurrently. The design and the zoning were pretty much meshed together towards the end, because the zoning, for those of you who may not be familiar with this, this piece of what we do, the zoning...
It's a daunting word, isn't it?
Yes, it is, and it's kind of boring. But what it does is it provides a property owner with an expectation of what they can do with their property. Most people are familiar with use restrictions, so residential, commercial. Our downtown has historically allowed for a great mix of uses, so it wasn't so much that, but how much you can build on a site that was at issue. How tall it can be, how much floor area you can build for a developer. That's really important to know how much return they can make on their investment.
I know this is zoning, but how tall of a building can we have in Ann Arbor?
It depends on our D1 district, which came out of the A2D2 effort. The downtown core district is 180 feet in that portion, if you think of the center part of the city, with an exception in the South U area, and that is 140 feet.
Lower profile over
Lower
there.
profile.
Okay.
And then the other piece that came out of this effort was something called a D2 district, and that is a downtown interface. And if you think about it kind of as a donut around the center, these are the areas like Carytown, the edges around the Old West Side, where there's less density desired because it's right up next to the residential. So
Yeah.
that's a 60-foot height limit in that area.
Okay. As an architect,
Yeah.
what has this meant to you, Damian, as you create projects in Ann Arbor?
The one that I really focused on, that's a real passion of mine, is the human experience at the sidewalk level. And we have some really, unfortunately, lousy examples. And hopefully, well, actually, and I think those lousy examples helped people understand how important the pedestrian experience is.
Mm-hmm.
So there are two things. There's the overall picture of the height, setback, detail of buildings. That's sort of the 30,000-foot view, if you will. I'm using cliches, as you know. But I really think the pedestrian experience, and I mean, Main Street is just a great example of just allowing the restaurants, for argument's sake, to come out onto the sidewalks. I think that a lot of the new buildings, City Hall, for instance, I think the pedestrian experience is great with the combination of landscape, building, the softening of the edge between sidewalk and building. That's really what we're talking about. I mean, we've got a couple of buildings where that junction between building and sidewalk is brutal.
So
I mean, it's just hard surface against hard surface.
When you're talking about density, Wendy, you have to look at the walkability, the
Yes.
aesthetics of what is going on the ground floor as well, right?
Right. And the consultants that we worked with did a nice little diagram that I think talked about what Damian said, you know, that big picture view. You look at what you want to occur, then you look at kind of the shape and massing of the buildings, and then you get down to that very fine-grained edge, you know, at the sidewalk or looking up at the building, what are the materials, and so that's where the design guidelines came in.
Yeah.
And so the sense was that we had talked about design guidelines for decades
Right.
in this community, but we just couldn't get beyond the issue of critiquing other people's design and allowing for flexibility. No one wants cookie-cutter designs. And so I think this, as you mentioned, some of those experiences, some buildings kind of push people to say, okay, we can lay the groundwork, especially about what we want to see at the sidewalk, and then that will help with these new buildings be to realize what we hope for this community.
Yeah.
So that resulted in this process that now has been set up for the design guidelines. And talk about the process.
Well, I'll just mention that Damian was very involved at the beginning. We had a citizens committee that took those ideas and said, okay, here's how we would like it to be, how we would like for a developer not to be held up unduly by this design review process. We want really to focus at the street level and you know, not be so prescriptive about materials or other types of things. So what we have now, after 2 years actually and 2 citizen groups worth of effort, are design guidelines that talk about suggestions for transparency at the street level.
Right.
So that means windows,
Yeah.
where the doors are placed, the lighting effects, solar orientation. So these are put in a document that we provide to a developer when they're talking to us about coming in to do a development, and we say, take a look at these. The community is very interested in these guidelines and also in context. They want buildings to respect the context that they're placed in, especially with the historic districts that we have downtown. And then we have now a design review board, appointed citizens that will meet and sit down with the developer in a very unthreatening way before the project is submitted and talk about, you know, here's what we are looking for as a part of this community. Maybe your design could be adjusted to address some of these issues.